Marcus Wellington had everything money could buy. His mansion sprawled across 50 acres of pristine California coastline, complete with marble floors that cost more than most people's houses. At 42 years old, he controlled a tech empire worth $12 billion. Yet as he sat in his leather chair that evening, staring at the security monitors, something felt wrong. The house staff moved through their routines like clockwork. Maria, his head maid for 8 years, supervised the evening cleaning with military precision. But lately, Marcus noticed things. Small things. His expensive watch moved slightly on the nightstand. Rare books shifted positions on shelves. Nothing missing, just different. "Sir, dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, announced James, his butler, from the doorway. Marcus nodded without turning around. "Tell me about Maria's son, the one who's been helping around here." James hesitated. "Diego, sir. He's 17. Been assisting his mother with lighter duties for about 3 months now. Very polite boy. Hard worker. Background check. Clean, sir. Honor student at the local high school. Plans to study engineering at community college next year." Marcus leaned back in his chair. Trust didn't come easily to someone with his wealth. Too many people had tried to take advantage over the years. Friends who borrowed money and disappeared. Business partners who sold secrets to competitors. Even family members who saw him as a walking bank account. The next morning, Marcus decided to test his suspicions. He positioned himself in his study, pretending to review quarterly reports while actually watching the hallway through his peripheral vision. Maria arrived at 8 sharp, keys jingling as she unlocked the supply closet. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington," she called out cheerfully. "Beautiful day today." "Morning, Maria. Will Diego be helping you again?" "Yes, sir. He's very grateful for the opportunity to earn some money for college." Marcus watched as a tall, lanky teenager appeared behind Maria. Diego had his mother's kind eyes, but carried himself with a confidence that seemed mature beyond his years. His clothes were clean, but clearly secondhand, jeans with a small patch on a knee, sneakers that had seen better days. "Good morning, Mr. Wellington," Diego said politely, meeting Marcus's gaze directly. No nervousness, no shifty behavior that Marcus had learned to recognize in people with hidden agendas. "Morning, son. How's school going?" "Really well, sir. I'm taking advanced physics and calculus this semester, planning to major in electrical engineering." Marcus nodded approvingly. Smart kid, but intelligence could cut both ways. Throughout the morning, Marcus found excuses to walk past areas where Diego worked. The teenager cleaned windows with methodical care, never rushing, never cutting corners. When he thought no one was looking, Diego picked up a book from Marcus's coffee table, a biography of Nikola Tesla, and flipped through it with obvious interest. Fascinating guy, wasn't he? Marcus said, appearing suddenly behind Diego. The boy jumped slightly, but didn't drop the book. "Sorry, Mr. Wellington. I shouldn't have touched your things. It's just, Tesla was incredible. Did you know he invented alternating current? Without him, we might not have modern electricity." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Most teenagers Diego's age could barely name 3 presidents, let alone discuss electrical engineering pioneers with genuine enthusiasm. "What interests you most about his work?" Diego's eyes lit up. "His persistence, sir. Everyone said his ideas were impossible, but he never gave up. He failed hundreds of times before his inventions worked. That's real science, not giving up when things get difficult." Interesting philosophy for someone potentially planning to steal from him, Marcus thought. Over the next few days, Marcus implemented his plan. He began leaving small tests around the house. A $100 bill tucked partially under a stack of papers on his desk. A valuable coin collection left open in his library. Expensive cufflinks scattered on his dresser as if accidentally dropped. Each evening, he checked his hidden cameras and noted the positions of everything. The money never moved. The coins remained untouched. The cufflinks stayed exactly where he'd placed them. But Marcus wasn't satisfied yet. Maybe Diego was just smart enough to avoid obvious traps. He decided to escalate the test. Friday afternoon, Marcus called Maria into his study. "I need to discuss something important with you." Maria entered nervously, wringing her hands. "Is everything all right, Mr. Wellington? Have I done something wrong?" "No, nothing like that. I'm going to be away next week on business. Important merger meetings in Tokyo. I'll need you to coordinate with the security company about the house monitoring while I'm gone." This was a lie. Marcus had no plans to leave. Instead, he intended to hide in the house's secret room, a panic room behind his study that only he knew about, installed during the mansion's construction. From there, he could watch everything through the house's extensive camera system. "Of course, sir. Diego, and I will take extra care of everything while you're away." "I'm sure you will." "Oh, and Maria, I'm leaving some important documents in my study. Business contracts. Very sensitive material. Please make sure that room gets cleaned carefully." Maria nodded seriously. "We'll be very careful with everything, Mr. Wellington." Marcus smiled. The documents he planned to leave would actually be fake contracts he'd have his lawyer draft, completely worthless papers that looked extremely valuable. If Diego had any intention of stealing information to sell to competitors, this would be the perfect opportunity. That evening, Marcus called his head of security. "Robert, I need you to do something for me. Tell the staff I'm leaving for Japan Sunday morning. Have a car pick me up at 7 a.m., but instead of going to the airport, bring me back through the service entrance. I'll be staying in the panic room for a few days." Robert had worked for Marcus for 6 years and never questioned unusual requests. "Understood, sir. Any particular reason for the surveillance?" "Just want to see how things run when I'm not around. Make sure everyone on the security team knows I'm supposedly out of the country. Only you should know I'm actually here." "Got it, boss." Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzly. Marcus packed a suitcase for show, complete with business suits and travel documents. At 7 sharp, the black sedan arrived in the circular driveway. "Have a safe trip, Mr. Wellington." Maria called from the front steps, waving as the car disappeared down the long driveway. 30 minutes later, Marcus slipped back into the house through the service entrance. The panic room was equipped with everything he'd need: a comfortable chair, small refrigerator, coffee maker, and, most importantly, monitors showing feeds from every camera in the house. Now the real test would begin. Marcus settled into his chair and began watching. The house felt different without his presence. The staff moved more casually, talking and laughing as they worked. Maria hummed softly while dusting furniture. Diego helped carry laundry baskets and seemed to be asking his mother questions about different cleaning techniques. Nothing suspicious so far. Around noon, Marcus watched Diego enter his study to clean. The teenager moved carefully around the massive oak desk, dusting each surface methodically. Marcus had left the fake contracts spread across the desk in what looked like hasty organization, the kind of important papers a busy billionaire might leave behind accidentally. Diego approached the desk and began dusting around the papers. Marcus leaned forward, watching intently through the hidden camera. The boy glanced at the documents briefly, then continued cleaning without touching them. But then something unexpected happened. As Diego dusted the bookshelf behind the desk, he noticed something that made him stop. One of Marcus's rare first edition books had fallen behind the shelf, wedged in the narrow gap between the bookcase and the wall. Diego looked around the room, then carefully moved the heavy bookcase just enough to retrieve the book. It was a signed copy of The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, worth about $15,000. Marcus held his breath. Here was Diego, alone with a book worth more than his family probably made in 6 months, thinking no one would ever know it had been rescued from its hiding spot. Diego examined the book carefully, running his fingers over the leather binding with obvious appreciation. He opened to the title page and saw the author's signature, his eyes widening with recognition of its value. For a long moment, the teenager stood there holding the book, and Marcus found himself gripping his chair arms. This was it, the moment that would prove whether his instincts about people were right or wrong. Diego looked around the study one more time, then walked to Marcus's desk. He picked up a piece of paper and began writing something. Marcus couldn't see what Diego was writing, but he watched the boy place the note under a paperweight on the desk, then carefully positioned the valuable book next to it where it would be easily visible. After Diego left the study, Marcus waited an hour before slipping out of the panic room to read the note. In neat handwriting, it said, "Mr. Wellington, I found this book wedged behind your bookshelf while cleaning. It looks very old and important, so I wanted to make sure you knew where it was. I put it on your desk so you wouldn't think it was missing. I hope your business trip is going well." Diego, Marcus stared at the note for a long time. In his world, this book represented a test that most people would have failed. Diego could have easily pocketed it, sold it, and no one would have been the wiser for months or even years. Instead, the teenager had not only resisted temptation, but gone out of his way to ensure Marcus knew the book was safe. Marcus returned to his hiding spot, but now his surveillance had taken on a different purpose. Instead of watching for theft, he found himself observing how Diego and Maria worked together. The boy didn't just help his mother. He seemed genuinely interested in doing things right. When Maria showed him how to properly clean silver without scratching it, Diego asked thoughtful questions about the chemistry involved. When she taught him to arrange flowers in the main hall, he listened carefully and practiced until he got the technique perfect. But what struck Marcus most was how Diego treated the house itself. Many of the staff saw their work as just a job. Clean the house, collect the paycheck, go home. Diego seemed to understand that he was caring for someone's home, someone's personal space. When he noticed a loose button on an expensive cushion, he asked Maria if he could repair it rather than just leaving it for someone else to deal with. When he found a small scratch on a wooden table, he researched online how to buff it out properly instead of just dusting around it. Tuesday evening, Marcus watched Diego organize in the library while Maria worked in other rooms. The teenager had discovered Marcus's collection of science and engineering books, and instead of just dusting them, he was carefully organizing them by subject and author. Marcus realized Diego was creating a better system than the expensive professional organizer had implemented the previous year. But then Marcus noticed something that made his chest tighten with an emotion he didn't expect. Diego had found Marcus's old college textbooks, engineering manuals that Marcus hadn't looked at in 20 years, but kept for sentimental reasons. The boy was sitting cross-legged on the floor, reading through an advanced calculus book with complete fascination. His lips moved slightly as he worked through complex equations in his head, and he occasionally pulled out his phone to look up concepts he didn't understand. This wasn't someone trying to steal secrets or gain information for personal advantage. This was a genuinely curious kid who loved learning and was taking advantage of access to books he could never afford to buy himself. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: shame. Here he was, spying on a teenager whose only crime was being poor and wanted to learn. Wednesday morning brought a new development. Diego arrived at work with a black eye and a cut on his lip. "What happened to you, Mijo?" Maria asked, speaking in Spanish as she examined her son's face. "It's nothing, Mama. Just some guys at school." "This is not nothing. Who did this?" Diego glanced around, making sure they were alone. "Some guys heard about me working here. They said I think I'm better than everyone else now that I work for a rich man. They said I was probably stealing stuff and getting ideas above my station." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. The kid was being bullied for working honestly to earn money for college. "You're not going to stop working here because of some jealous boys," Maria said firmly. "No way, Mama. I love this job. Mr. Wellington has the most incredible book collection I've ever seen. And yesterday, when I was organizing the library, I learned more about electrical engineering than I have in months of classes. Just be careful, okay? Maybe we should tell Mr. Wellington what happened." "No," Diego said quickly. "I don't want him to think I'm trouble. This job, it's not just about the money, Mama. Being in that house, seeing how successful people live, it makes me believe I can actually make it to college and become an engineer. I can't lose this opportunity because of some stupid bullies." Marcus had to step away from the monitors. This kid was getting beaten up for working an honest job, and his first concern was not wanting to lose the opportunity to better himself. How had Marcus become so cynical that he assumed the worst about a teenager whose only goal was earning money for education? That afternoon, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. He called his lawyer. "David, I need you to set up something for me. An educational fund. I want it to cover full tuition, books, and living expenses for a deserving student studying engineering." "Of course, Marcus. How much are we talking about?" "Whatever it takes. Full ride through a 4-year university, plus graduate school if the grades are good enough." "That's very generous. Do you have a specific school in mind?" Marcus smiled. "Let the student choose. But make sure the fund is set up anonymously. I don't want the recipient to know where the money comes from." Thursday evening, Marcus watched Diego and Maria working together in the main hall. The teenager's bruises were fading, but Marcus could see he moved more carefully, as if his ribs were still sore. Despite his injuries, Diego worked with the same careful attention to detail he'd shown all week. When he thought no one was looking, he pulled out his phone and took a picture of a complex mathematical equation carved into the decorative molding above the fireplace. Something Marcus had commissioned from an artist years ago, but never paid much attention to. Diego was studying the equation like it was a treasure map. At that moment, Marcus realized his test had revealed something completely different from what he'd expected to find. He hadn't caught a thief or a con artist. He'd discovered something much rarer. A young person with integrity, curiosity, and determination to improve his circumstances through honest work and education. Friday afternoon, Marcus prepared to end his surveillance. He'd seen enough to know exactly what kind of person Diego was, and he felt embarrassed by his initial suspicions. But first, he had one more thing to do. Marcus slipped out of the panic room and placed an envelope on his study desk where Diego would find it during the final cleaning. Inside was a letter of recommendation for college applications, praising Diego's character, work ethic, and intellectual curiosity. It was written on Marcus's personal letterhead and would carry significant weight with any admissions committee. Along with the letter was a note. "Diego, I may not have been home this week, but I have cameras for security. I saw how you found my lost book and took care to return it safely. I also saw how much you enjoyed the engineering books in my library. You're welcome to borrow any books you'd like to help with your studies. Just ask Maria to keep track of which ones you take. Good luck with your college applications. M. Wellington." Marcus returned to his hiding spot to watch Diego's reaction when he found the envelope. At 4 o'clock, Diego entered the study for the final cleaning of the week. He dusted and organized with his usual care, then noticed the envelope with his name on it. He opened it slowly, his eyes growing wider as he read. When he finished, Diego sank into Marcus's desk chair, holding the letter with shaking hands. "Mama," he called out, his voice cracking with emotion. "Mama, come here." Maria rushed into the study, alarmed by the urgency in her son's voice. "What's wrong? What happened?" Diego handed her the letter, unable to speak. Maria read it twice, her own hands beginning to tremble. Monday morning came with unexpected anticipation for Marcus Wellington. For the first time in years, he was genuinely excited to meet someone new rather than viewing every introduction as a potential threat to his wealth and privacy. As his black sedan pulled into the circular driveway at precisely 8 a.m., Marcus felt nervous in a way that reminded him of his early days building his company. Maria and Diego were waiting on the front steps to welcome him home, just as they would for any returning employer. But Marcus now saw them differently. Instead of hired help to be watched and evaluated, he saw a hardworking mother and her remarkable son who deserved better than his suspicions. "Welcome home, Mr. Wellington," Maria called out cheerfully. "How was your trip to Japan?" "Productive, thank you." The merger negotiations went well. Marcus climbed the steps, noting how Diego stood respectfully, but without the nervous energy that marked people with hidden agendas. "Diego, I trust you helped your mother keep everything running smoothly?" "Yes, sir. We took very good care of everything." Marcus nodded, playing his part as the returning businessman. "I left some important papers in my study. I hope they weren't disturbed during cleaning." "Not at all, sir. Though I did find one of your books had fallen behind the bookshelf. I left you a note about it on your desk." "Perfect. The kid was even more honest face-to-face than he'd been when he thought no one was watching. I appreciate that. Tell me, Diego, are you still planning to study engineering? The teenager's eyes lit up. Yes, sir. I've been researching different programs and trying to save money for applications. College is expensive, but I think I can make it work with scholarships and student loans. Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest. He'd grown up wealthy, never worrying about application fees or textbook costs. The idea of this bright kid struggling to afford the education he deserved felt fundamentally wrong. What type of engineering interests you most? Electrical and computer engineering, sir. I love how those fields are changing the world. Renewable energy, artificial intelligence, space exploration, it all starts with engineering innovations. Maria beamed with pride as her son spoke. Marcus could see where Diego got his values, from a mother who'd raised him to work hard and dream big despite their financial limitations. Well, I'll let you both get back to work. Diego, if you'd like to continue helping your mother here, I'm satisfied with your performance. Thank you, Mr. Wellington. I really appreciate the opportunity. As Marcus walked toward his study, he heard Maria whispering to Diego in Spanish. See, I told you Mr. Wellington is a fair man. He recognizes good work when he sees it. If only she knew how unfairly he'd judged them both, Marcus thought. Later that morning, Marcus called his head of security into his study. Robert, I need you to look into something for me. Discreetly. Diego, Maria's son, is having trouble with bullies at school. Kids who think he's stealing from me because he works here. Robert raised an eyebrow. Want me to have a conversation with the school administrators? Nothing that obvious, but maybe we could arrange for some positive recognition for Diego that would make it clear he's here legitimately. Academic Achievement Award, community service recognition, something that shows he's earned his position through merit. I'll see what I can arrange, boss. Marcus spent the rest of the morning reviewing actual business reports, but his mind kept wandering to the educational fund he'd set up for Diego. His lawyer had called that morning to confirm everything was in place, with the scholarship to be announced through Diego's school guidance counselor as part of a community partnership program. The anonymous nature of the gift was crucial. Diego needed to believe he'd earned this opportunity himself, not that it was charity from a guilty billionaire. Around noon, Marcus decided to visit the library where Diego was working. He found the teenager carefully organizing technical manuals while his mother cleaned the adjacent sitting room. Finding everything you need in here? Marcus asked. Diego looked up, startled but not guilty. Yes, sir. I hope you don't mind, but I noticed your engineering books weren't organized by publication date. I thought it might be useful to group them by specialty instead. Electrical, mechanical, civil engineering, that sort of thing. Marcus looked at the shelves. Diego's system was not only more logical than the previous arrangement, it was better than most university libraries Marcus had visited. That's quite an improvement. How'd you know to organize them that way? My school library is tiny, so I spent a lot of time at the public library downtown. The engineering section there uses a similar system, and it makes finding related topics much easier. What do you like to read when you're not studying for school? Diego's cheeks reddened slightly. Honestly, biographies of successful engineers and inventors. I know it sounds nerdy, but I like learning how they overcame obstacles and turned their ideas into reality. Marcus found himself genuinely smiling. That doesn't sound nerdy at all. Which biographies have impressed you most? Well, obviously Tesla, like we talked about before, but also Katherine Johnson. She was the mathematician who calculated flight trajectories for NASA. And Elon Musk, even though people have mixed opinions about him. Say what you want about his personality, but he's proven that one person with determination can revolutionize entire industries. Interesting choices, Marcus thought. All people who'd succeeded through intelligence and persistence rather than inherited wealth. What do you think is the most important quality for success in engineering? Diego considered the question seriously. Problem-solving creativity, I think. Anyone can memorize formulas and equations. But the best engineers see problems differently than other people. They find solutions that nobody else thought to try. Can you give me an example? Diego's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. Sure, like when they were building the Brooklyn Bridge in the 1870s. Traditional construction methods couldn't handle a span that long over water that deep. So John Roebling designed underwater pneumatic casings, basically giant diving bells where workers could excavate the riverbed for the foundation towers. Nobody had ever tried anything like that before. Marcus was impressed. Most adults didn't know that level of detail about historical engineering projects. How did you learn about the Brooklyn Bridge construction? I checked out a book about famous bridges from the public library. The engineering challenges were incredible. They had to solve problems with water pressure, foundation stability, material strength, worker safety. Each solution created new problems that needed creative answers. As Diego talked, Marcus realized the teenager wasn't just smart. He was passionate about learning in a way that couldn't be faked or taught. This was the kind of intellectual curiosity that made great engineers, great entrepreneurs, great innovators. Diego, would you mind if I asked you a personal question? Of course, Mr. Wellington. When you look at this house, what do you think about? Diego glanced around the library with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, antique furniture, and priceless art. Honestly, I think about the engineering that went into building it. The structural design, the electrical systems, the plumbing, the climate control. This house is basically a very comfortable machine, and every piece had to be designed and installed perfectly for everything to work together. Another surprise. Most people saw Marcus's wealth when they looked at his home. Diego saw the technical achievement. And when you think about your own future, what do you hope to accomplish? I want to design things that help people. Maybe renewable energy systems for developing countries, or medical devices, or infrastructure that can withstand natural disasters better. I know those are big goals, but engineers have been solving impossible problems for thousands of years. Why not add a few more? Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Genuine inspiration from another person's dreams and ambitions. That afternoon, Marcus made an excuse to work in the library while Diego organized books. He wanted to observe the teenager's work style without the barrier of security cameras. Diego approached each task methodically but creatively. When he discovered that some of the older engineering texts had loose pages, he didn't just stack them carefully and hope for the best. Instead, he researched proper book conservation techniques on his phone and asked Maria if there were any acid-free storage materials in the house. Why acid-free? Maria asked. Regular paper and cardboard are acidic, Diego explained patiently. Over time, acid breaks down the fibers in old books and makes the pages crumble. Acid-free materials prevent that damage. Maria smiled proudly. My son, the professor. Just chemistry, mama. Same principles that apply to cleaning. Understanding what causes damage so you can prevent it. Marcus listened to this conversation while pretending to read quarterly reports. Diego's natural teaching ability impressed him almost as much as the boy's knowledge. He could explain complex concepts in simple terms without talking down to his audience. Around 3 o'clock, Marcus's phone rang. His assistant's voice was tense when he answered. Mr. Wellington, we have a problem with the Singapore project. The engineering reports don't match the construction timeline, and our investors are asking hard questions. Marcus sighed. This was exactly the kind of crisis that usually consumed his entire day and ruined his evening. Set up a conference call for 4 o'clock. Get our head engineer and the project manager online. As he hung up, Marcus noticed Diego looking at him with concern. Everything okay, sir? You look stressed. Marcus hesitated. His instinct was to keep business problems private. But Diego's genuine concern felt different from the polite inquiry of an employee. Just a construction project in Singapore. The engineering timeline doesn't match what our contractors promised. And now we're behind schedule with very expensive consequences. What kind of construction? Diego asked, then quickly added, Sorry, I don't mean to pry. It just sounds like an interesting problem. Marcus found himself describing the situation in more detail than he'd intended. We're building a new manufacturing facility for computer components. Very precise environmental controls required. The engineering firm promised completion in 18 months, But now they're saying the foundation work alone will take 8 months because of unexpected soil conditions. Diego listened intently. Did they do proper geotechnical surveys before designing the foundation? The question caught Marcus off guard. I assume so. Why? Well, Singapore is built on reclaimed land in a lot of areas. The soil composition can vary dramatically even within a single construction site. If they didn't do enough soil testing, they might have designed the wrong type of foundation for the actual conditions. Marcus stared at the teenager. How do you know about Singapore's soil conditions? Diego looked embarrassed. I read about it in a case study about the Marina Bay Sands Hotel construction. They had to use a really innovative foundation design because of the challenging soil conditions. I thought it was fascinating how they solved the engineering problems. This 17-year-old had just identified what might be the core issue with a multi-million-dollar construction project, based on reading he'd done for his own education. Diego, would you mind if I showed you our engineering reports? I'm curious about your thoughts. Diego's eyes widened. Are you sure, Mr. Wellington? I'm just a high school student. Smart is smart, regardless of age. Besides, fresh perspectives often catch problems that experts miss. Marcus pulled up the Singapore project files on his tablet and handed it to Diego. The teenager studied the documents with the same focused attention he'd shown while organizing books. After 10 minutes, Diego looked up. Mr. Wellington, I think there might be a bigger problem than just the timeline. What do you mean? This soil report only covers about 60% of the construction site. And look at these bearing capacity numbers. They vary by more than 50% across the tested areas. If I were designing this foundation, I want a lot more data before moving forward. Marcus felt his stomach drop. If Diego was right, they weren't just dealing with delays. They were potentially looking at a complete foundation redesign that could cost millions and delay the project by a year or more. Are you sure about this analysis? I could be wrong, sir. I've only studied this stuff in books. But those soil condition variations suggest they haven't tested enough of the site to know what they're really dealing with. Marcus picked up his phone and called his head engineer directly. Tom, Marcus here. I need you to review the Singapore geotechnical surveys again. Specifically, I want to know what percentage of the construction site has been properly tested for soil conditions. There was a pause on the other end. We tested all the required locations according to local building codes. Marcus, that's not what I asked. What percentage of the total site? Another pause, longer this time. Probably 60, maybe 65%. Marcus closed his eyes. A teenager with no formal engineering education had spotted a critical flaw that his expensive consultants had missed. Tom, I want comprehensive soil testing across 100% of that site before we pour another cubic yard of concrete. I don't care what it costs. Marcus, that could delay the project by months dash, not as long as rebuilding a failed foundation would delay it. Give me a full report by Friday. Marcus hung up and looked at Diego, who was watching nervously. Sir, I hope I didn't cause problems by speaking up. I know, I don't have the experience to really dash. Diego, you may have just saved this company millions of dollars. That was exactly the kind of fresh thinking we needed. The teenager's face flushed with pride and disbelief. Really? Really? In fact, I'd like to ask you a favor. Would you be willing to look at some other engineering challenges we're facing? I'd pay you for consulting time, of course. Diego looked stunned. You want me to consult on real engineering projects? Why not? Intelligence and curiosity are more valuable than credentials. Besides, you're planning to study engineering anyway. This would be excellent practical experience. Yes, sir. I'd love to help however I can. Marcus spent the next hour showing Diego 3 other technical challenges his company was facing. The teenager approached each problem with the same methodical curiosity he'd shown with the Singapore project. His insights weren't always correct, but they were always thoughtful and based on solid reasoning. More importantly, Diego asked questions that Marcus's experienced engineers hadn't thought to ask. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying the intellectual collaboration. When was the last time he'd had a conversation about engineering problems rather than financial projections and profit margins? Sir, Diego said as they finished reviewing the third project. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why are you being so kind to me? I'm nobody special, just a maid's son who likes to read about engineering." Marcus considered his answer carefully. The truthful response involved his week of surveillance and initial suspicions, neither of which he was ready to admit. "Diego, in my business, I meet a lot of people who want something from me. Money, connections, opportunities. It's refreshing to meet someone who's genuinely interested in ideas and problems rather than personal gain. I'm interested in opportunities, though. I want to go to college and become an engineer. That's different. You want to earn opportunities through your own effort and ability. Most people want opportunities handed to them because of who they know or what they can offer me in return." Diego nodded thoughtfully. "My mom always says that anything worth having is worth working for. Your mother is a wise woman. She's raised a remarkable son." As 5 o'clock approached, Marcus realized he'd spent the entire afternoon engaged in the kind of meaningful conversation he'd almost forgotten was possible. Diego's enthusiasm for learning and problem-solving reminded Marcus why he'd fallen in love with engineering and business in the first place. "Diego, I have a proposition for you," Marcus said. "Instead of just helping your mother with cleaning, would you be interested in a part-time position as a technical research assistant? You'd help me review engineering proposals, research new technologies, maybe even visit some of our project sites." The teenager's jaw dropped. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. The pay would be significantly better than housework, and the experience would look excellent on college applications." "Mr. Wellington, this is incredible. Thank you so much." Marcus held up a hand. "Before you thank me, understand that I'd expect real work. This isn't charity. I genuinely believe your perspective could be valuable to my business." "Understand, sir. I won't let you down." As Diego left that evening, practically floating with excitement, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his opinion of the teenager had changed in just 1 week. He'd started by testing Diego's honesty. He'd ended up discovering a young man whose integrity was matched by intelligence, curiosity, and determination that reminded Marcus of his younger self. The boy deserved every opportunity Marcus could provide, not as charity, but as recognition of genuine merit. And Marcus found himself looking forward to tomorrow's work in a way he hadn't experienced in years. 3 weeks into Diego's new role as technical research assistant, Marcus Wellington found himself fundamentally rethinking how his company approached problem solving. The teenager brought a fresh perspective that challenged assumptions Marcus's experienced team had never questioned. Tuesday morning began with an unexpected crisis. Marcus's phone rang at 6 a.m. with news that made his stomach churn. "Mr. Wellington, this is Janet from our Austin facility." His plant manager's voice was tight with stress. "We've got a major problem. The new automated assembly line has been down for 16 hours. Our engineers can't figure out what's wrong, and we're losing production capacity worth hundreds of thousands of dollars per day." Marcus sat up in bed, instantly alert. "What happened?" The system was working perfectly yesterday afternoon, but when the night shift came in, everything started malfunctioning. Robotic arms moving erratically, conveyor belts stopping randomly, quality control sensors giving false readings. It's like the entire system is confused. Have our engineers identified any pattern to the failures? That's the weird part. There doesn't seem to be any pattern. Different components fail at different times for apparently different reasons. The engineering team is baffled. Marcus rubbed his forehead. The Austin facility was crucial to meeting their quarterly production targets. Extended downtime would not only cost money, but potentially damage relationships with major clients. "I'll fly down there today. Keep documenting everything until I arrive." As Marcus ended the call, he found himself thinking about Diego's methodical approach to problem solving. The teenager never accepted surface explanations. He always asked deeper questions about root causes and system interactions. Maybe a fresh perspective was exactly what this situation needed. An hour later, Marcus called Diego's cell phone. "Hello, Mr. Wellington," Diego answered, sounding slightly out of breath. "I'm just getting ready for school." "Diego, How would you like to take a field trip to Austin today? We got an engineering crisis that could use your analytical skills. There was a moment of stunned silence. You want me to come with you to investigate a real industrial problem? If you're interested, I'd clear it with your school and your mother, of course. This could be valuable learning experience. Are you kidding? Yes. Yes, sir, I'd love to help. Pack an overnight bag. We might need to stay through tomorrow if the problem is complex. 2 hours later, Marcus and Diego were airborne in Marcus's private jet, heading toward Austin. Diego spent the flight studying technical specifications for the malfunctioning assembly line, asking thoughtful questions about the system's design and operation. Mr. Wellington, can you explain how the different subsystems communicate with each other? Diego asked, looking up from a tablet displaying system schematics. Each component has embedded sensors that transmit data to a central control computer. The computer coordinates all the movements and processes based on program parameters. What kind of communication protocol do they use? Marcus realized he didn't know the technical details. I'd have to ask our engineers. What? Well, if different components are failing randomly without any mechanical cause, it might be a communication problem rather than a hardware problem. Like if the sensors are sending conflicting data or if there's interference in the signals. Marcus made a note to explore this possibility. Once again, Diego was asking questions that hadn't occurred to the experts. They landed in Austin at noon and drove directly to the manufacturing facility. The plant manager, Janet, met them at the security gate with barely contained frustration. Mr. Wellington, thank goodness you're here. We've had our best engineers working on this for 18 hours straight, and we're no closer to a solution. As they walked toward the factory floor, Marcus introduced Diego. Janet, this is Diego, my technical research assistant. He's been studying the system specifications and has some theories about the malfunctions. Janet looked skeptical. Diego appeared even younger in person than his 17 years, especially wearing jeans and sneakers among the formally dressed engineers. No offense, kid, but we've got PhD engineers who can't figure this out. What makes you think I'm not trying to replace your engineers, Diego interrupted politely. I just learn differently than people with formal training. Sometimes an outside perspective helps. The factory floor was chaos. Normally, the automated assembly line hummed with precise mechanical ballet, robotic arms moving in coordinated sequences, conveyor belts carrying components through various stations, quality control sensors checking each product before packaging. Now, the entire system lurched unpredictably. A robotic arm would reach for a component, then suddenly swing in the wrong direction. Conveyor belts would start and stop randomly. Status lights flashed error codes in no apparent pattern. Show me exactly what's happening, Marcus said to the lead engineer, a graying man named Dr. Peterson who looked exhausted. That's just it, Mr. Wellington. There's no exactly. Every malfunction is different. We've checked the mechanical systems, the software programming, the power supply, even the network connections. Everything tests normal individually. Diego walked slowly along the assembly line, observing the chaotic behavior with intense focus. Marcus watched him stop at different stations, examining control panels and sensor arrays. After 10 minutes, Diego approached Dr. Peterson. Sir, can I ask what changes were made to the system recently? Any new components, software updates, maintenance work? Dr. Peterson consulted his tablet. Nothing major. Routine maintenance last weekend. A minor software patch on Monday to optimize efficiency. Nothing that should cause systemic failures. What exactly did the software patch change? It adjusted timing sequences to increase throughput by about 3%. Very minor modifications to the coordination algorithms. Diego nodded thoughtfully. And the routine maintenance, did that involve any of the sensor arrays? Just standard cleaning and calibration. We do it every month. Marcus watched Diego process this information. The teenager's expression suggested he was forming a hypothesis. Dr. Peterson, could you show me the timing sequence data from before and after the software patch? The engineer pulled up 2 sets of complex charts on his tablet. Diego studied them intently, his finger tracing patterns across the screen. "There," Diego said suddenly, pointing to a specific section of data. "Look at these timing intervals. The software patch shortened the delay between sensor readings, right? Yes, by about 50 milliseconds. That's what gives us the 3% efficiency gain. But look at this sensor calibration data from the weekend maintenance. Several of the sensors now have slightly longer response times, probably just normal aging of the equipment." Dr. Peterson frowned. "Those response time changes are well within acceptable parameters. Individually, yes. But if you combine the shorter software timing with the longer sensor response times." Diego grabbed a piece of paper and started sketching. "The system expects a sensor reading at time X, but the sensor doesn't respond until time X plus 50 milliseconds. So the central computer makes decisions based on outdated information." Marcus felt excitement building as he followed Diego's logic. "That would explain the random behavior," Marcus said. "Different sensors have different response delays, so the timing conflicts occur at different intervals." "Exactly," Diego said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "It's like trying to have a conversation where everyone talks at slightly different speeds. Eventually, people start responding to things that were said several sentences ago." Dr. Peterson stared at the teenager with growing amazement. "That actually makes perfect sense. We were so focused on testing individual components that we never considered how the interactions might have changed." "Can we test this theory?" Marcus asked. Dr. Peterson was already typing on his tablet. "I can temporarily revert the software patch to the previous timing sequences. If Diego's right, that should restore normal operation." They gathered around the central control station as Dr. Peterson uploaded the previous software version. Within minutes, the chaotic behavior on the factory floor began to settle. Robotic arms moved smoothly through their programmed sequences. Conveyor belts maintained steady speeds. Status lights showed normal green. The assembly line was working perfectly again. "Unbelievable," Janet breathed. 18 hours of downtime, and a high school student figured it out in 30 minutes. Marcus felt pride swelling in his chest, not for his own accomplishment, but for Diego's brilliant analysis. "Diego, that was exceptional problem solving. How did you know to look at the interaction between those two changes?" Diego looked slightly embarrassed by the attention. "I read a case study about a similar problem at a Toyota plant in Japan. They had intermittent failures that turned out to be caused by tiny timing mismatches between upgraded software and aging sensors. I just remember the pattern." Dr. Peterson shook his head in admiration. "I've been an industrial engineer for 20 years, and I never would have made that connection. We owe you a debt of gratitude, young man." As the team worked to implement a permanent fix, adjusting the software timing to accommodate the sensor response delays, Marcus pulled Diego aside. "That was incredible work. You saved us hundreds of thousands of dollars and potentially millions in lost production capacity." "I just got lucky, Mr. Wellington. I happened to read about a similar situation." "Diego, that wasn't luck. That was intelligence, curiosity, and the kind of systematic thinking that makes great engineers. You recognized a pattern that experienced professionals missed." That evening, over dinner at a nice Austin restaurant, Marcus found himself reflecting on the day's events. Diego had not only solved a complex technical problem, but done so with humility and respect for the experienced engineers around him. "Diego, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course, Mr. Wellington. When you figured out the solution today, you could have been arrogant about it, showing off that you were smarter than the PhD engineers. Instead, you were respectful and collaborative. Where does that maturity come from?" Diego considered the question while cutting his steak. "My mom taught me that being smart doesn't make you better than other people. It just means you have a responsibility to use your abilities to help. That's wise advice. Besides, those engineers know thousands of things I don't know. I just happen to remember one thing that was relevant to this specific problem. That doesn't make me smarter. It just makes me useful in this particular situation." Marcus was struck by the teenager's perspective. In his experience, most people with Diego's analytical abilities developed egos to match. This kid remained humble despite repeatedly proving himself exceptional. What do you want to do with your engineering degree once you get it? Eventually, I'd like to start my own company, Diego said. Not to get rich, necessarily, but to work on problems that really matter. Clean energy, medical devices for developing countries, infrastructure that can withstand natural disasters better. Those are ambitious goals. What makes you think you can succeed? Honestly, I might not. But I've learned that most innovations come from people who refuse to accept that problems are unsolvable. If I can help solve even one significant problem, that would be a life well lived. As they flew back to California the next morning, Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives. Diego, I want to make you an offer. A real offer, not just expanded responsibilities. The teenager looked up from the engineering journal he'd been reading during the flight. What kind of offer, Mr. Wellington? I want you to work for my company part-time through your senior year of high school. Then, full-time during summers while you're in college. After you graduate, I'd like you to consider joining our engineering leadership team. Diego's eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely serious. Yesterday proved that you have the kind of analytical thinking and problem-solving ability that our company needs. Plus, your perspective on technology for social good aligns with some new initiatives I've been considering. What kind of initiatives? Marcus smiled. That's something we could develop together. I've been thinking about using technology to address problems in developing countries. Exactly the kind of work you mentioned wanting to do. Diego stared out the window at the clouds below, processing this unexpected opportunity. Mr. Wellington, this is incredible, but I have to ask, why are you doing this for me? I mean, you barely know me. Marcus had been dreading this question because the honest answer involved admitting his initial suspicions and surveillance. Diego, I've spent 20 years in business learning to judge people's character. You've shown me integrity, intelligence, curiosity, and humility, qualities that are incredibly rare. I'm not doing this as charity. I'm doing it because I believe you can help my company succeed while also making a positive impact on the world. And if I accept this offer, what would my responsibilities be? Learning everything you can about engineering, business, and leadership. Contributing to real projects where your perspective adds value. Helping me develop new technology initiatives focused on social impact. Diego turned back from the window, his expression serious. Mr. Wellington, I accept your offer. And I promise you won't regret giving me this opportunity. As they shook hands, Marcus realized that his test of Diego's character had evolved into something he never expected, a genuine partnership that might change both their futures. The kid who'd started as a suspected thief was now positioned to become one of Marcus's most trusted collaborators. 6 months after the Austin factory crisis, Marcus Wellington stood in his private conference room facing a decision that would define the next chapter of his business empire. Across from him, 3 senior executives presented competing proposals for the company's expansion into developing markets. The profit margins in Southeast Asia are incredible, insisted Patricia, his chief financial officer. We can manufacture there at 30% lower cost and sell at premium prices because of our brand recognition. Africa represents the real growth opportunity, countered James, head of international development. Completely untapped markets with minimal competition. We could dominate entire sectors. Robert, his technology director, spread charts across the conference table. Both regions have infrastructure challenges that could limit scalability. We need to be realistic about implementation timelines. Marcus listened to their presentations with growing frustration. Each executive saw developing markets as opportunities to exploit cheaper labor, desperate customers, weak regulations. None of them understood what he was really looking for. Thank you all. I'll review your proposals and get back to you. After they left, Marcus sat alone in the conference room, staring at profit projections and market analysis reports that missed the point entirely. He wasn't interested in exploiting developing countries. He wanted to help them while building sustainable business models. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Diego entered carrying a laptop and several thick folders. You asked me to research renewable energy opportunities in rural communities, Diego said. I think I found something interesting. Over the past 6 months, Diego had become Marcus's most valuable consultant on social impact initiatives. The teenager worked part-time after school and weekends, combining his technical knowledge with genuine passion for solving real-world problems. What did you discover? Diego opened his laptop and projected a presentation onto the conference room screen. I've been studying energy access in rural Kenya. About 40% of the population lives without reliable electricity. Most current solutions focus on large-scale grid expansion, which is expensive and takes decades to implement. Marcus leaned forward. What's your alternative approach? Decentralized microgrids using solar power and battery storage. Each village would have its own small power generation and distribution system customized for local needs and resources. The presentation showed detailed engineering diagrams and cost analyses. Diego had clearly spent considerable time developing this concept. The technology already exists, Diego continued. Solar panels are cheaper than ever. Battery technology is improving rapidly, and smart grid management systems can optimize power distribution automatically. The challenge is financing and technical support. What kind of financing are we talking about? Each village system would cost between $50,000 and $100,000 to install. That sounds expensive, but it's actually much cheaper per person than extending traditional power grids to remote areas. Marcus studied the numbers. The financial investment would be significant, but manageable for his company. More importantly, Diego's approach addressed real needs rather than simply creating new markets to exploit. How would we ensure these systems remain operational? Rural communities might not have technical expertise for maintenance and repairs. Diego smiled. That's the brilliant part. We'd train local technicians in each region and establish regional support centers, create jobs while ensuring system sustainability. Plus, we design the systems for modularity. If one component fails, it doesn't shut down the entire village. Marcus felt excitement building. This was exactly the kind of initiative he'd been hoping to develop, technology that generated profit while creating genuine social value. What about return on investment? My board will want to see how this makes financial sense. Multiple revenue streams, Diego said, advancing to the next slide. Initial system sales, ongoing maintenance contracts, financing services for communities that need payment plans, and licensing our technology to other companies working in similar markets. And the social impact? Incredible. Reliable electricity means children can study after dark. Health clinics can refrigerate medicines. Small businesses can operate more efficiently. And people can charge communication devices to stay connected with family and markets. Marcus was impressed by Diego's comprehensive analysis. The teenager had considered not just the technical challenges, but the business model, social benefits, and implementation strategy. Diego, this is outstanding work. How long did you spend researching this? About 3 months, working evenings and weekends. I contacted engineers working on similar projects in other countries, interviewed development organizations, even spoke with people from rural Kenya through online forums. The thoroughness of Diego's research reminded Marcus why he valued the teenager's contributions so highly. Diego didn't just propose solutions. He investigated them from every angle. What would you need to pilot this concept? Diego's eyes lit up. Really? You'd consider implementing this? I'm seriously interested, but I want to understand the practical requirements. We need a partnership with local organizations in Kenya, probably starting with 1 or 2 villages for proof of concept. Initial investment of maybe $300,000 for the pilot program. And we need a small team of engineers willing to spend time on-site during implementation. Marcus made notes as Diego talked. The financial commitment was reasonable, the potential impact was significant, and the learning opportunity for both companies would be valuable regardless of long-term profitability. There's something else, Diego added hesitantly. I know this might sound crazy, but I'd love to be part of the implementation team. I could take a gap year between high school and college to work on this full-time. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Your mother would be okay with delaying college? I haven't asked her yet, but this would be incredible real-world experience. Plus, if the pilot succeeds, it could become my senior thesis project when I do start college. The idea of Diego spending a year in rural Kenya, learning engineering implementation firsthand, appealed to Marcus's sense of adventure and education. Let's develop this proposal further before making any commitments about gap years. But I want you to know that your research has convinced me this is worth pursuing. Over the next month, Diego refined his proposal while Marcus quietly investigated the practical requirements for international development work. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that Diego's microgrid concept represented exactly the kind of innovation his company should be leading. Meanwhile, Marcus noticed changes in Diego beyond just his technical abilities. The teenager carried himself with growing confidence, spoke more assertively in meetings, and demonstrated leadership skills when working with other employees. "Sir," Diego said one afternoon as they reviewed updated cost projections, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Why are you supporting me like this?" "I mean, you've given me opportunities that most people my age couldn't imagine. There must be a reason." Marcus had been expecting this question for months. Diego deserved an honest answer, even if it meant admitting his initial suspicions. "Diego, when you first started working here, I didn't trust you. I thought you might be trying to steal from me or take advantage somehow." Diego looked surprised, but not hurt. "What changed your mind?" "I tested you. Left valuable items around to see if you'd take them. Watched you through security cameras. I was convinced that anyone in your financial situation would eventually try to steal something. And you proved me completely wrong. Not only did you never take anything, you went out of your way to protect my belongings and report problems you discovered. You taught me that integrity has nothing to do with wealth or social status." Diego processed this information thoughtfully. "Were you disappointed when I didn't steal anything?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "What do you mean?" "Well, if I had stolen something, it would have confirmed what you already believed about people. Instead, I forced you to reconsider your assumptions. That could be uncomfortable." Marcus realized Diego understood the psychological dynamics better than he'd given him credit for. "Initially, yes. It's easier to maintain cynical beliefs than to admit you've been wrong about people. But ultimately, you gave me something more valuable than confirmation. Hope that not everyone is motivated by greed. I'm still motivated by self-interest, Mr. Wellington. I want to succeed and build a good life. I just believe the best way to do that is by helping other people succeed too." This perspective impressed Marcus more than Diego's technical abilities. The teenager understood that enlightened self-interest, pursuing personal goals through activities that benefited others, was the foundation of sustainable business success. That evening, Marcus called an emergency board meeting to present Diego's microgrid proposal. He knew some board members would be skeptical of a social impact initiative proposed by a 17-year-old, but he was determined to advocate for the project. The boardroom filled with his company's most senior leaders. These were hard-nosed business executives accustomed to evaluating proposals based purely on financial metrics. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, "I want to present an opportunity to enter the renewable energy market in developing countries. This initiative could position us as leaders in sustainable technology while generating significant long-term profits." He walked through Diego's presentation, emphasizing the business case while explaining the social benefits. Several board members asked pointed questions about risk management, return timelines, and competitive advantages. "Who developed this proposal?" asked Margaret, his longest-serving board member. "Diego Ramirez, my technical research assistant." "The teenager who solved our Austin factory problem?" "The same one. He's proven to have exceptional analytical abilities and innovative thinking." Margaret exchanged glances with other board members. "Marcus, this is a solid proposal, but are we really considering a major international expansion based on research by a high school student?" Marcus had anticipated this objection. "I'm asking you to consider the proposal based on its merits, not the age of its author." Diego's analysis is more thorough than many consulting reports we've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to receive. What's our total financial exposure if this fails completely? Asked Robert, the chief financial officer. Initial pilot program requires $300,000. If successful, full-scale implementation would require about $5 million over 2 years. But the potential market opportunity is worth hundreds of millions annually. The room fell silent as board members considered the numbers. I moved to approve the pilot program, Margaret said finally. $300,000 is a reasonable investment in market research, and if this kid's track record is as good as Marcus claims, it's worth testing his ideas. The vote was unanimous in favor of proceeding with the microgrid pilot. As board members filed out, Margaret approached Marcus privately. That boy of yours has real potential, but be careful about raising expectations too high. Success at 17 doesn't guarantee success at 30. Marcus nodded. I understand the risks, but Diego has something special, not just intelligence, but wisdom and integrity that most adults never develop. Just make sure you're investing in the right reasons. Guilt over past suspicions shouldn't drive business decisions. Margaret's warning was valid, but Marcus knew his motivations had evolved beyond guilt. He genuinely believed Diego represented the future of socially conscious business leadership. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood with Diego in his private office, looking at airline tickets and visa applications for Kenya. Are you sure about this gap year? Marcus asked. College acceptance letters will be arriving soon, and deferring enrollment is a significant decision. Diego held up an acceptance letter from Stanford University. I got into my first choice school. They've agreed to defer my enrollment for 1 year if I'm working on an approved engineering project. Marcus felt pride and concern in equal measure. Diego was giving up a year of traditional education to pursue this ambitious project. Your mother supports this decision? She's nervous, but she understands how important this opportunity is. Besides, she's proud that her son is working to help people in other countries. Diego, I want you to understand something. This project might fail. Rural electrification is complex, and we're working in challenging environments. If the pilot doesn't succeed, that won't reflect negatively on you. I know there are risks, Mr. Wellington. But imagine if it works. We could bring electricity to hundreds of villages, create thousands of jobs, and prove that profitable businesses can solve social problems. As Marcus looked at Diego's determined expression, he realized the teenager had become much more than an employee or protege. Diego represented Marcus's own evolution from suspicious billionaire to someone who believed business could be a force for positive change. The boy who'd started as a suspected thief was now trusted with leading the most ambitious and meaningful project of Marcus's career. Sometimes the greatest opportunities came disguised as the biggest risks. 2 years later, Marcus Wellington stood in the main square of Kimana village in rural Kenya, watching children do homework under LED lights powered by the microgrid system Diego had designed and implemented. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a community that shut down at sunset was now vibrant with evening activity. The medical clinic stayed open until 9 last night, explained Dr. Sarah Mwangi, the local health worker. We performed our first after-dark surgery last month. Appendectomy on a teenager who would have died if we'd had to wait for morning transport to Nairobi. Marcus nodded, making notes on his tablet. He'd come to Kenya for the 2-year progress review, expecting to find either spectacular success or instructive failure. What he discovered was something more complex and valuable than either extreme. How has the system reliability been? He asked. Excellent. The backup batteries have prevented any power outages, even during the cloudy weeks of the rainy season. And when the solar panel efficiency dropped due to dust buildup, the monitoring system alerted our maintenance team automatically. The monitoring system had been Diego's innovation. Instead of waiting for villagers to report problems, sensors tracked system performance and transmitted data to regional technicians via cellular networks. Problems were often fixed before users even noticed them. And economic impact? Dr. Mwangi smiled broadly. Incredible. 6 new businesses have started since we got reliable electricity. A computer repair shop, 2 internet cafes, a cold storage facility for dairy products, and even a small manufacturing workshop that makes solar phone chargers for neighboring villages. Marcus calculated the numbers in his head. The microgrid had cost $85,000 to install and about $12,000 annually to maintain. But the economic activity it enabled generated over $200,000 per year for the local community. More importantly, the project had become financially self-sustaining. Villages now paid monthly fees for electricity that covered system maintenance and gradual equipment replacement. The local technician training program had created a network of qualified workers who could support multiple villages in the region. Where's Diego now? Marcus asked. He's in the workshop with James, reviewing designs for the next village installation. That boy never stops working. Marcus walked across the village square toward a corrugated metal building that served as the regional technical center. Through the open doorway, he could see Diego hunched over a laptop with James Kamani, the young Kenyan engineer who became his closest collaborator. At 19, Diego had grown taller and gained confidence that came from 2 years of solving real problems in challenging environments. But he retained the curiosity and humility that had impressed Marcus from the beginning. Mr. Wellington, Diego looked up with a grin. Perfect timing. We just figured out how to reduce installation costs by another 15%. Show me. James, who'd graduated from the University of Nairobi with a degree in electrical engineering, pulled up technical drawings on a large monitor. Diego realized we could use locally manufactured battery housings instead of importing them from China. Lower cost, faster delivery, and it creates jobs for metal workers in Nairobi. Diego added, plus local manufacturing means easier repairs and replacements. We're not dependent on international shipping for basic maintenance. Marcus studied the revised system design. Diego's continuous improvements had transformed the original concept into something more efficient and sustainable than Marcus had imagined possible. How many villages are we serving now? 43, Diego said proudly, with 8 more installations scheduled for the next 6 months. We're also getting inquiries from organizations in Ghana, Bangladesh, and Guatemala who want to license our technology. The success exceeded every projection from Diego's original proposal. What had started as a pilot program was becoming a substantial business unit with global expansion potential. Diego, can we talk privately for a few minutes? They walked outside the workshop to a bench overlooking the village. Children played in the square, while adults conducted evening business under reliable electric lighting. The scene represented everything Marcus had hoped to achieve through socially conscious business practices. How do you feel about returning to Stanford next month? Marcus asked. Diego was scheduled to begin his freshman year after completing 2 years of practical engineering experience. Stanford had not only held his acceptance, but offered him advanced placement credit for his work in Kenya. Excited but nervous, Diego admitted, college will be different from this. More theoretical, less hands-on problem solving. You'll do fine academically. I'm more concerned about cultural adjustment. You've been leading international development projects and managing substantial budgets. It might feel strange to be treated as an inexperienced freshman. Diego laughed. I've been thinking about that. Maybe I can start a student organization focused on engineering for social good. Share what I've learned here with other students who want to work on similar projects. Marcus wasn't surprised by Diego's instinct to teach and inspire others. Leadership came naturally to the young man. I have a proposition for you, Marcus said. Wellington Technologies wants to establish a permanent division focused on sustainable development projects. I'd like you to head that division after you graduate. Diego's eyes widened. You're offering me executive leadership of an entire business division? The Sustainable Impact Division, reporting directly to me. You'd have authority over project selection, budget allocation, and strategic direction. We're talking about expanding beyond rural electrification to water purification, medical technology, educational infrastructure, sustainable agriculture, Whatever problems you think we can help solve profitably. Mr. Wellington, that's incredible. But why me? I'll only be 23 when I graduate. There are engineers with decades more experience. Marcus had anticipated this question. Experience isn't the same as effectiveness, Diego. In 2 years, you've proven you can identify real problems, design practical solutions, manage complex implementations, and build sustainable business models. Most experienced engineers can't do all of those things successfully. But leading an entire division, you've already been leading. James and the other regional technicians look to you for direction. Village leaders trust your judgment about their infrastructure needs. Our board considers you the expert on development projects. You just haven't had the formal title. Diego stared across the village square, processing the magnitude of what Marcus was offering. If I accept, what will be my first priority? Scale what we built here. I want sustainable energy access for 10,000 villages across Africa, Asia, and Latin America within 10 years. After that, we expand into water, healthcare, education, wherever technology can improve lives while generating sustainable profits. That's an enormous undertaking, which is exactly why I need someone who thinks big but executes carefully. Someone who understands that the best business opportunities come from solving real problems for people who need help. Diego turned to face Marcus directly. Mr. Wellington, can I ask you something I've been wondering about for 2 years? Of course. When you first suspected I might steal from you, what would you have done if I actually had taken something? The question caught Marcus off guard. I would have fired you and probably prosecuted you for theft. And you would have missed out on everything we've accomplished together. Marcus realized Diego was making a profound point about judgment, assumptions, and missed opportunities. That's true. Why do you ask? Because I've been thinking about how many other people with potential get dismissed because of circumstances beyond their control. Poverty, family background, lack of formal credentials, even just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. What does that suggest to you? That maybe the Sustainable Impact Division should focus as much on developing human potential as on deploying technology. Train local engineers, fund scholarships for promising students, create apprenticeship programs that give people opportunities to prove themselves. Marcus felt a familiar excitement, the same feeling he'd experienced when Diego first explained the microgrid concept. The young man was always thinking beyond immediate problems to systemic solutions. That's brilliant, Diego. Technology is just a tool. Real development happens when people have opportunities to improve their own lives. Exactly. We can install solar panels and water purification systems, but the real impact comes when local people learn to design, build, and maintain those systems themselves. As the sun set over Kimena village, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that afternoon when he decided to test Diego's honesty by pretending to sleep. What had begun as suspicion and surveillance had evolved into the most meaningful partnership of his career. Diego, I want to tell you something I should have said months ago. Working with you has changed how I think about business, wealth, and responsibility. You've shown me that the most profitable investments are often the ones that help other people succeed. Diego looked surprised by the emotional tone of Marcus's comment. Mr. Wellington, you gave me opportunities one never could have imagined. Everything I've accomplished has been possible because you chose to trust me despite having reasons to be suspicious. We've helped each other, Diego. That's what real partnerships do. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the village come alive under electric lighting that hadn't existed 3 years earlier. Children studied. Adults conducted business. The medical clinic remained open for emergencies. A small internet cafe allowed people to communicate with family members working in distant cities. There's something else I want to discuss, Marcus said. Your mother. What about her? Maria has worked for my family for almost 10 years. She deserves better than cleaning houses for wealthy people, no matter how well she's paid. Diego looked concerned. Is there a problem with her work? No, the opposite. I want to offer her a position managing our corporate headquarters facility. Oversee all building operations, coordinate with maintenance, and security, supervised the cleaning, and sometimes the best discoveries came from the tests you almost didn't conduct. Me, Joe, this is incredible. Mr. Wellington wrote you a recommendation letter. He knows I'm not a thief, Mama. He trusts me enough to let me borrow his books. Some of these books cost hundreds of dollars each. Marcus watched mother and son embrace, both of them crying tears of gratitude and relief. He realized that his week of surveillance had taught him more about himself than about Diego. When had he become so suspicious of people's motives? When had he started assuming that everyone was trying to take advantage of him? Diego represented something Marcus had almost forgotten existed: genuine goodness. The teenager wasn't perfect, but he was honest, hardworking, and grateful for opportunities to improve himself. As Marcus prepared to return from his business trip the next day, he found himself looking forward to openly getting to know Diego better. Maybe it was time to stop hiding behind security cameras and start trusting people again. After all, if a 17-year-old with nothing could choose integrity over easy money, maybe there was hope for the world yet. The test had revealed more about the tester than the tested, and Marcus realized that sometimes the biggest discoveries came from the risks you almost didn't take.